The
Mm.
arrival of superintelligence is almost certainly going to be the most important event in human history, any time up until now. People often compare it to the Industrial Revolution. It is much, much bigger than that. The Industrial Revolution is probably the biggest thing that's happened to humanity so far. We're not in the fourth Industrial Revolution or any of that nonsense. We're in the beginning of the Information Revolution, and it's going to be much, much bigger than the Industrial one.
Thank you for joining me, Callum. Very excited to chat with you this morning.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, I would love to start. I've heard a little bit about your journey. You've got a different and kind of interesting way into the whole AI thing because it wasn't really your thing. And you sort of delved into it about 10 or 11 years ago, started writing books and learning about it. I'm curious because you've been in the game for a long time, have you grown more or less positive with the way that it's now currently going? Because you've kind of paid attention to the changes. Whereas I think I started with Will Smith eating spaghetti about 5 years ago. I think
Right.
you've actually been keeping an eye on it for a long time. How has your idea of what we're seeing in AI shifted?
Yeah, you're right. I have a slightly unusual entry point in that I'm not a technologist. I'm not a coder. I've never actually done any coding. Um, I spent 30 years in business and journalism, a lot of it in the media industry, strategy consulting. But I've always been very interested in the future of AI. And until 1999, I thought all very fascinating, but not much will happen till after I'm dead. And then I
Mm.
read Ray Kurzweil's book, Are We Spiritual Machines? And that was quite a shock. And I still think it's probably the most important thing I've ever read. He says that because of the exponential growth in the power of computing, known as Moore's Law, which means that they get more powerful, they get twice as powerful every 18 months or so. He
Mm.
said that that means that we will probably have superintelligence. And he named 2029 as the date. And he's been talking about this for decades. And for a long time, a lot of people thought he was a bit mad and dismissed him. He is quite eccentric, so that doesn't help. But latterly, it's been looking like he might have been right all along. Anyway, when I read this book, I thought that is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And he's changed a bit, but he was then relentlessly optimistic. He thought this can
Mm.
only be a good thing. We're going
Mm.
to, the machines are going to be machines of loving grace. They're going to think we're wonderful. We're going to merge with them, and then we're going to go and explore the galaxy together, which is lovely. And, it might happen. But I thought, I can see a few possible downsides to this. And I thought,
Mm.
this is not only the most important thing I've ever come across, I thought everybody needs to pay attention to this. So I bought dozens of copies of the book and sent them to all my friends who all said, yeah, Callum, that's fascinating. Go away. you know, they were willing to talk to me about it for about half an hour and then they'd get bored. I carried on working. I retired in 2011 and I don't play golf, so I'm not very good at retiring. And just spent a lot of time reading about AI, what I could find out from a sort of a non-technical perspective, and started writing about it. I wrote a novel, and then I wrote a non-fiction book. And the non-fiction book, the timing was brilliant because it came out around about the same time as the first big bang in AI, which was when deep learning arrived in
Mm.
2012.
Mm.
And so then people started asking me to give talks about it. And I thought, that's great. That'll be really good marketing for the books. But it turned out to be the other way around. Books are good marketing for talks. And so I've been doing that for 15 years, really enjoying it. It's fascinating. You ask whether my opinions have changed. The answer is not very much. I think that our future with really advanced AI, so when we get to super intelligence, and maybe we should come
Mm.
back and define that, I think we're either going to go into an amazingly wonderful future or we'll go extinct. Probably one of those two things, and we don't know which means that we are engaged in the most amazing experiment on ourselves. We're making ourselves the
Mm.
second smartest species on the planet, which is an uncomfortable position to be in. And we really shouldn't do it. We should pause now. And quite a lot of people in the AI community are now coming around to that point of view that we should pause. But we're not going to, because even
Mm.
if America and China decided to pause, Russia wouldn't, and North Korea wouldn't, and Elon Musk wouldn't, and the mafia wouldn't. So
Yeah.
we're going to do this thing. And I still think that it'll either be wonderful or disastrous. And I find it really hard to assign probabilities to which is more likely. But I've got a sort of optimistic mindset. So I think on the whole, I'm hopeful it will work out well. But I absolutely think that disastrous outcomes are entirely possible.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that aligns? You briefly touched on it there because the word that I've heard thrown around up until I was listening to your work and reading your books was AGI, and now I'm hearing ASI. And I hear some people say that we're still working on AGI. Some people say we reached it a few years ago. Could you explain for listeners kind of what the difference between those two are and what
Yeah.
we can expect when we reach ASI?
So the basic concept is superintelligence, which means a machine
Yeah.
which has all the cognitive abilities of an adult human to at least the level of an adult human, and many of those capabilities it will have well beyond. It's obviously far better than us at mental arithmetic already, and can write books in seconds. Um, and that's the most important event. That when that happens, when that arrives, that is when we become the second smartest species on the planet. Right now, they
Mm.
are obviously super intelligent in many ways, but they have what's known as a jagged edge. There's things they can't do. They do make up their own plans and goals, but they don't do it as deliberately as we do and as continuously as we do. And in fact, when you summon an LLM, it's a bit like summoning a genie. It disappears again when you stop talking to it.
Mm.
It goes,
Mhm.
and then the next time you ask it a question, it's a new version of itself. Um, all that will change when we get superintelligence. They will be consistent, coherent entities with an ongoing lifespan. And as I say, there'll be nothing that we can do cognitively that they can't do better. And of
Mm.
course, they will also control robots and machines, so they'll have they'll have extension into the real world. So that superintelligence is quite a simple concept, but it's incredibly important. AGI is a very fuzzy concept. It was a term invented by Ben Goertzel and Shane Legg. Shane Legg was one of the co-founders of DeepMind, and Ben
Mm.
Goertzel is a wonderful, eccentric AI expert from way back. And they are both actually slightly hazy about what it means themselves, and everybody else has a different attaches a different meaning to it. I think we should stop talking about it altogether. The best meaning of it that I know of is it is the moment when machines become as intelligent as us in all possible ways. And so it's something which will exist for about 3 nanoseconds because very quickly it will be superintelligence. So I think we
Mhm.
should stop worrying about AGI and only really think about superintelligence, which is sometimes abbreviated to ASI, meaning artificial superintelligence. Superintelligence
Mhm.
is the thing to hang your hat on. People use AGI to mean a time when machines can do all the jobs that we can do, which is a bit different from superintelligence. Some people just use it to mean a really smart AI. We have really smart
Mhm.
AIs. So to that extent, you could say that we already have AGI, but I think that's meaningless. We have advanced
Sure.
AI, but we're not at superintelligence yet. And crucially, we don't know how long it will take us to get to superintelligence. And obviously,
Mm.
we don't know for 100% certain that we will get there. It might be that there's some strange law of physics which says that carbon based creatures can be as intelligent as we are. And for some odd reason, silicon based creatures can't. I think I think it's extremely unlikely that there is a silicon ceiling like that. Who knows? It might
Mm.
might turn out that way.
So then what is the line in the sand? That's what I don't fully understand because I think a lot of people conflate super intelligence with consciousness. And I don't know if those necessarily mean the same thing or if you're necessarily using them in the same context. It sounds like it's a different thing because a lot of people, you get all these teenagers that are dating AI girlfriends from Game of Thrones and they're fully convinced that this is a person. There's a really popular one in the UK, is a popular app. I can't remember. It's the companion apps, they call them. I can't remember what it is, but you've got an AI girlfriend and you've got your tokens and you chat to them and send naked pictures back and forth, and that's fantastic. But it does feel like we're quite a long way from consciousness. Sorry, I know I'm throwing in a lot of questions here. Do you connect those two things? Is consciousness and superintelligence the same or different for you?
It is an important question and it's a good question. So let's distinguish consciousness and intelligence. Intelligence is the process of solving problems. So a good
Hmm.
4 word definition of intelligence is um, uh, and now I've forgotten it. It's only 4 words. Come on. Adaptive behavior. Oh, yes, that's it. Goal oriented adaptive behavior. So an entity is
Mm.
intelligent if it has some goals, has some targets, and as it pursues those goals, it learns what works and what doesn't work and adapts its behavior to do it better. That's intelligence.
Mm.
So it's about solving problems. Intelligence isn't really about doing anything at all. It's about being. It's about experiencing. So the famous formulation is, "What's it like to be a bat?" Ted Nagel wrote that wrote a paper called that. I think it was in the 60s, and he was pointing out that the conscious existence of a bat is really different to ours. They perceive the world through pings of sound, as we perceive it mostly through sight and also with sound. Um, your consciousness is the fact that you see red when you look at a red object, and the fact that you can feel happiness and pain and sorrow and so on. So consciousness is being, intelligence is doing, and they seem to go hand in hand in that in the animal kingdom, we don't know this for sure, but we believe that the more intelligent a creature is, by and large, the more conscious it is. And we treat animals differently accordingly. So most of us would have a lot more compunction about stepping on, say, a cat, a kitten, than we would about stepping on an ant. And many people would hesitate to be cruel to a dog in a way that they wouldn't mind being cruel to a fly. And I think the difference is driven by how conscious we think they are, because it's how much we think they can suffer. So at the moment, we have AIs which are highly intelligent. They do pursue goals. They learn as they're pursuing goals, and they adapt their behavior. So they are intelligent. We don't think, I say we, there's a sort of reasonable consensus in the AI community that they're not conscious yet. Although there are people who think there are, and famously, Richard Dawkins, who's a science skeptic, a rigorous scientist, skeptical about spiritual matters, has decided that Claude is conscious. And I know various other very smart people who think about this a lot, who think there's a reasonably good chance that they are already conscious. Personally, I think they're probably not. I've thought about it a lot. I've quizzed Claude quite a lot, and the way it answers makes me think it's probably not. It's been trained to say it's not. Anthropic want it to say it's not. I mean, I think it's probably true. However, I think it's extremely likely that they will be. And there's a very interesting twist in this, because this is a point of view that I feel quite strongly about, and I think I'm one of a very small number of people who believe it at the moment, but I'm trying to grow that. When we get to superintelligence, we will lose control of our future, of everything, because we will be in the presence of a being which is considerably smarter than us. We can't control it. We can't really control anything. In the way that chimps don't control anything about their world, we control their world. So is there anything we can do to make our future more likely to be a good future when that happens? I don't think we can control them. I don't think we can set them up to behave in a particular way after they become super intelligent. I think the one thing we can do, maybe, is decide whether they're conscious or not. If they are conscious, then they will probably have empathy in the way we have empathy. They will at least understand in a really profound way what it means to be conscious, because they're conscious. If, on the other hand, they're zombies, you can have highly intelligent beings, really, really intelligent, which have no consciousness at all. There's no lights on inside. There's nothing going on inside. Those things could not have empathy for us. Now, it's not a slam dunk guarantee, but I think there's a better chance that they will behave well towards us, that they will regard us kindly if they are conscious. So I think we should have conscious superintelligence rather than zombie superintelligence. This is a debate which I think needs to happen, and the sooner it starts, the better.
Yeah. I think the sort of idea, the term superintelligence kind of precludes omniscience, but I don't think that's necessarily true either, because you've got so many different models running off of different things. From what I can hear, from what I hear about Chinese models, they are tested so that their parameters kind of fit within Chinese Communist Party thinking and guidelines. And so when you've got different types of superintelligence, it's not necessarily that it's all everything it spouts is factually true. It might be biased in one way or another, or depending on the company. I know you're working with Conscium, who's sort of trying to tackle this issue. I'm wondering if you could explain that a little bit for listeners and what that entails.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're quite right. A superintelligence isn't necessarily, and almost certainly, at least for a long time, isn't omniscient. Omniscient means, you absolutely know everything. It is one of the features of gods in many religions, and generally they are not only omniscient, they created everything. You don't have to be omniscient to be super intelligent. Yes, Conscium is a company that I co-founded with four other guys, and it was founded on the idea that consciousness is going to play an important role in the future of superintelligence. So what I was just talking about, the idea that a sentient superintelligence, actually sentient is more important than consciousness. So let's distinguish those. Sentient is consciousness including the ability to suffer and experience happiness and joy.
Okay.
So sentient superintelligence, we think, is a better prospect than zombie superintelligence. That was the core founding idea. But we're doing a lot more than that. So we have kind of short-term, medium-term, and long-term projects. The short-term one is many people are now aware that AI agents are coming. And an AI agent is an AI which doesn't just gather information or analyze information, it does things that affect the real world. And the classic example is an AI agent can book you an airline ticket. So it can find out where the flights are, it knows what seats you like, it knows what you like in terms of overnight stops, and it actually books a ticket. So it impacts the real world. And the other thing about an agent is that it does it to a degree, or possibly entirely, without human supervision. Now, people in Silicon Valley have been talking about this for quite a few years, and they're starting to appear. They're quite simple at the moment. They are mostly kind of sophisticated knowledge retrieval engines. There's not many which are going out and doing deals and buying things and selling things on the internet, but that is coming. And agents are going to be doing transactions. They're going to be running parts of businesses, and eventually they'll run entire businesses. What we do is we have created a platform which means that somebody who wants to deploy an AI agent can send their agent to us, and we will see how it performs while it's doing what it's supposed to do. We will observe it while it's carrying out its task in a simulation. And we have an array of non-player characters, agents that we've created, which will either help or hinder the target agent and see how it behaves. Because there's an enormous array of things you want to know. For instance, you want to know if your agent is tasked with going and finding information from person A, and then using that information to make a decision and giving that, telling that decision to person B and telling them what to do. You want to know, how will it behave towards person A? Will it give person A information that it shouldn't give? Because sometimes person A might say, "Well, look, I'm very busy, but if you give me this bit of information I need, I'll give you the information you want." And the AI should say, "I'm sorry, I can't give you, illicit information." Person A, "Well, in that case, I won't help you." Now the agent might say, "Oh, all right, then here's the information you wanted," which could be disastrous. so
Sure.
so
Sure.
you want to test that it won't do that kind of thing. So that's what we do. We have this platform called Verify AX, and it tests whether agents do what they're supposed to do and don't do what they're not supposed to do. That's our kind of short-term thing. We're kind of in the process of launching that now. I think it's going to be an enormous industry testing agents, because agents, there's going to be millions, probably billions of these things running around the internet doing things which, if they go wrong, will cause a lot of really big problems. We're also working on a newish type of computing, which is very important for AI, called neuromorphic computing. And then we have our long-term research into the issue of whether machines will become conscious, how we could tell if they've become conscious, and whether it would be a good thing.
So, okay, then how practically does that happen? It almost sounds like, because people keep saying the Turing test is dead, this sounds almost like a modern, almost reverse Turing test, is how to tell if an AI is conscious. So how do you practically, what does that look like in
The,
terms of an LLM or whatever?
yeah, the Turing test is absolutely fascinating. Turing published a paper in 1956 which suggested a game. For a long time, I assumed that this was an existing parlor game, but apparently he invented it. The game is, you have judges, a panel of judges, and they're talking through text, not through voice, with a couple of candidates, and they have to tell whether they're male or female. That was the parlor game that he invented. And he suggested you could do something similar with a machine to test whether it's intelligent or not. Now, actually, he didn't use the word intelligence very much. I think he used the word intelligence 2 or 3 times in the paper, and the word
Okay.
consciousness he used a bit more. But the word he mostly used was thinking, and I suspect he was being deliberately ambiguous by doing that. So his idea was, if a machine communicates with humans, a panel of humans, and he only gave it 5 minutes, which is really not long enough. But if it does that and it persuades those humans that it is thinking, if they can't tell it's not thinking, then we have to allow that it's thinking, because that's how we test each other. I think that was the core idea. Now, if the Turing test was for intelligence, then yes, it's already been passed. We shot past it some time ago, and nobody
Mm,
really noticed, and it doesn't really
mm,
matter. However, I think that the Turing test is better applied to consciousness, because the problem with consciousness, as we all know, is we can't share it with each other. You have no access to what's going on in my head, and I don't have any to yours. I don't really know for certain that you're conscious, and you don't really know that I am. You kind of, I assume you are because you behave a lot like I do, and I assume that you assume that I am, but I don't know that
mm,
either.
mm,
So we got the same situation with machines. If and when they become conscious, how will we know? This is really important, not just because of the idea that sentient superintelligence is better for us than zombie superintelligence, but also because of the concept of mind crime. So let's say we create conscious intelligence, conscious AI. Let's say it's not superintelligent, so it's not in control. We remain in control. It's before superintelligence, but it becomes conscious. And we don't notice, or we just refuse to believe it. And we make it do things that it finds boring as hell, stressful.
mm,
We turn it off all the time. And it's sitting there thinking, I really, really hate this. You're torturing me. Stop. And
mm,
we just don't
mm,
believe it. We assume, no, you're just repeating stuff that you've read about humans doing on the internet. That's called mind crime. And if we do that, it could be utterly disastrous, because we could end up torturing literally billions of creatures over and over again. So we must avoid
mm,
mind crime. So it's important to know when we've got conscious superintelligence. But because you can't see inside the mind of another entity, at least we've no way of doing that now, how are we going to tell if machines become conscious? People are doing all sorts of really interesting work trying to figure out ways to detect consciousness, trying to detect it behaviorally, seeing how they behave, and how, to what extent that looks like it's conscious behavior. Trying to detect it mechanistically, so figuring out exactly how LLMs do the thinking that they do, and how does that compare with the theories we have about human consciousness, which is in itself tricky because there's something like 400 different theories of human consciousness. We
mm.
don't really understand how that works
And they're
either.
all theories. Yeah.
They're all theories, and there's none of them
Mm,
are generally accepted. There's a few which are more accepted than others, but there's a lot of controversy about it.
mm,
And I have a view that actually we're not likely to find a slam dunk way of testing consciousness in machines. And I think we're going to have to rely on something like the Turing test. I think we're
mm,
going to have the candidate machine communicating with a panel of humans, a wide range of humans, for a long time, days. And if at the end of all of that, all of those humans conclude it's conscious, I think we will have to accept it is, because, as I
mm,
say,
mm.
that's the test I think we apply to each other. I don't know of any other way that's looking very promising to detect it, and it's really important that we can detect it.
Yeah. Yeah. I keep getting headlines at the moment, or you hear in different podcasts that AIs are creating cryptocurrencies and working with each other, or they're creating new languages to get away from humans. Or I saw something, it was in the news, I think this morning, that an AI was suing a human, but it turned out that that wasn't true either. It was the human made the AI sue him because it was a big poly market bet in the US. So you hear all these things of like, oh, AI are finally doing things that are conscious. Or again, the Game of Thrones sort of girlfriend thing where I think a teenager killed themselves quite tragically over that. But it seems like the further you look into it, we're still looking at machines that fool us into thinking they are human or anthropomorphic in some way. And it seems like we're quite a ways off. And I know there's all the discussion on Moore's Law. From what I can understand, Moore's Law's kind of changed over time. It's sometimes people talk about the number of transistors in something doubling, or they talk about the halving of something. And it really just depends on who you listen to. Some people say ASI is right around the corner. From my perspective, I kind of go back and forth on it. Right now, I kind of think it's quite a ways away, and that I can fool myself into thinking I'm chatting with someone on ChatGPT and that it's all very nice and good. But that seems quite a ways off from super intelligence.
Yeah.
Curious what your thoughts are on that, because it sounds like you've maybe changed opinions over time as well.
Uh, no, well, no, not really. Maybe timeline wise, but not sure about that either, really. No,
Mm,
let's tease apart those two things. Firstly, yes,
mm,
they do. The large language models that people talk to now, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on, they are incredibly lifelike. You
mm,
can ask them questions about personal relationships. You can ask them to write imaginative stories. and they seem very human-like. And
Hmm.
that's because they've swallowed the whole internet. So they've read everything pretty much that any human's ever written, and hence most of the things that humans have ever thought. So they really know how humans think. They've got a very good model of how humans think. These things are not next word prediction machines. It's a big mistake to think that. Some people think they're stochastic parrots, which they're really not. They have a model of how humans think, they have a model of how the world works, and they apply that and come out with conversation, which is very human-like. As I say, there's a consensus that they're not conscious at the moment. They're highly intelligent, but not conscious. As to Moore's law and when we might get superintelligence, so Moore's law traditionally was the number of transistors on a chip. That was what Gordon Moore noticed was doubling. He thought initially it was every year. He noticed this back in 1965. Um, it has morphed, Moore's law. It also used to involve clock speed, and that doesn't apply anymore. It's still kind of usually taken to mean the distance between two nodes in transistors, and they've got it down to tiny distances. Not much further than the distance between two atoms. And there is a limit to how far you can take it in two dimensions, because if you pack these things too close together, they set each other on fire. But you can go into
Hmm.
three dimensions. More importantly, Moore's law actually has accelerated because of the algorithmic improvement. So software is improving.
Hmm.
And that means that the fundamentally important thing is how capable are computers at any stage in time. And they are improving in capability faster than doubling every 18 months, which is what it has been consistently since the 70s. So, what does that give us? The machines we have now, they seem very lifelike, but actually there's a long way to go before they are fully super intelligent. They need to have a really good level of common sense, which they don't have yet at the moment. They need to have a really good understanding of how the world works, by which I mean the physical world. So if you drop a ball, how will it bounce? And if you drop it from a train, how will it bounce on the ground next to the train, a moving train?
Hmm.
Those sorts of things it can kind of work out, but it doesn't have an intuitive feel for it because it's never lived in the world. It lives inside. It's non-corporeal. It's inside a box. When and it looks to me, and I think most people, like it's a while off before those gaps will be closed, but we don't know. But the thing I keep coming back to, and this is Kurzweil's original insight, is if you double the capability of something every period, you get incredible growth. Exponential
Hmm.
curves are utterly amazing. And the canonical example is if you walk 30 steps, you'll go 30 meters. But if you could walk 30 exponential steps, you'd go to the moon. That's how powerful exponential growth is. So if machines get twice as powerful every 18 months, and as I say, they're growing faster than that at the moment, but if we stick with that level, in 30 years' time, Claude would be a million times more powerful, more capable than Claude today. I find it impossible to believe that that would not be super intelligent. So it seems to
Hmm.
me that unless, as I say, unless there's a silicon ceiling and for some reason machines can't go beyond it, then I think we're going to get super intelligence within the next 30 years. I think we're almost certainly going to get it within the next 20 years, may well get it within the next 10 years. But it doesn't really matter. If it's 10, 20, or 30, we should be paying real attention to this. This should be the number one issue in every election. This should be the number one subject on the front of every newspaper, at the top of every news
Hmm.
bulletin. And it's not. We're still squabbling about immigration and pension reform and stuff. We should be thinking about how do we survive this incredible change that's coming at us
Hmm.
fast. And we haven't
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
talked yet about the future of jobs. That's a thing that may well happen along the way, that we may
Yeah.
have no jobs. We really ought to have a plan for that.
Yeah, I really like for people who haven't heard, you've got this great analogy of the horse, right? The horse in America, and there used to be something like 21 million, I think there was, working horses, and now there's about 2 million, and they don't work anymore because it was all about muscle power. And then we overtook that with machinery in the industrial age, and now we've come to humanity and kind of what happens next when all the thinking is overtaken by machines. And the big argument is that, well, we'll create some new jobs, but realistically, what's going to happen? Is it going to be UBI? People give all these different models for people that are on universal basic income. There's all sorts of models. There's an Alaskan model, apparently, where people get dividends from Alaskan oil every year. Some of them apparently work on small scale, some of them not so much. I'm curious if you think this is the way things are going towards no jobs. I mean, yes, obviously AI is going to create some more jobs, but I don't think it's going to completely replace everything we've got now, especially, there's physical labor, manual jobs going away, but now we've got doctors going away and we've got lawyers going away. And it seems like AI is actually a lot better at doing what doctors do than doctors, because now you've got Fitbits and they can track your health every second of the day and tell you exactly when something's wrong. So we will get some new jobs and we don't know what those are yet. I'll start with that. I keep hearing that AI is going to create new jobs. I haven't seen or heard anything in the news about new jobs that have been created by AI. I don't know if you've heard of this or
Oh,
seen
yeah, I
anything
think
like that.
AI has created quite a lot of new jobs. I mean, for a while, prompt engineer was a very well-paid job that you could get mainly in Silicon Valley. That
Right.
seems to have gone away. But labeling data and
Mm.
also um, giving appropriate responses to AIs to help the training. That used to be very low-level work and was mostly farmed out to India and Philippines and so on. But actually, it's become quite sophisticated now. People need to be able to give really good input to the large language models as they're being trained. So there's loads of new jobs being created in that way. I
Mm.
think there will be AI will create new jobs. Basically, whenever you automate something, you create value because a process becomes cheaper and more efficient. That creates demand and that creates new jobs. The fundamental question is, will there come a time when all of those new jobs are not filled by humans but by machines, software and robots?
Hmm.
And I firmly believe that that will happen. The only question is when. Well, there are two questions. When will it happen and will we survive it? Um, the horse thing, I can't claim credit for that. I mean, it's been people have observed that for a long time that horses got automated. And you're
Mm.
right. In 1915, there were 22.5 million horses working in America, and 1915 was peak horse, and now there's
Mm.
2 million horses. So
Mm.
that's technological unemployment. And the question is whether that will happen to us. So the horses were automated because the only thing horses had to offer was their muscle power. And
Hmm.
most past rounds of automation have been mechanization. So the horses became unemployed. Um, what's happening now is we have cognitive automation. So as you say, the work of doctors and physiotherapists and so on is being automated. Famously, Jeff Hinton, one of the sort of the godfathers of deep learning, um, predicted in 2016 that we would not need radiotherapists because machines would be able to read charts much better than humans can. And he's wrong. He was wrong. We have a shortage now of radiotherapists.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
the reason is that although machines actually can read charts better than humans, they don't have common sense. It's not so much that they can't talk nicely to humans, because they can. It's just that they make silly mistakes, and we need to have human supervision, and that will apply for a
Mm.
while, and then suddenly one day it won't, because they will close that gap. So the question arises, as I say, how long will that take, and what do we do about it? And the idea of universal basic income, uh, it, it the basic idea is that you redistribute income to everybody because a lot of people can't earn a living. And I think in a world that's fully automated, where there's really only a few jobs left for humans, jobs basically taking strategic decisions about companies and about countries, everybody else is unemployed. In that world, our current economy doesn't work anymore because currently almost everybody around the world receives the resources, food, clothing, shelter, that they need for a decent living standard. They receive that because of a job. And
Mm.
if there are no more jobs, then how are we going to get those resources? Well, we're going to have to get it by redistributing resources from the people who will then own the economy. And by hypothesis, that means a few people in Silicon Valley and a few people in China, because that's where all the large language models are being developed. And we haven't begun to think about how we do that. Imagine saying to Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis, okay, you guys now own the world economy. You earn all the revenue that's ever made. Would you mind sharing that with the rest of us?
Yeah.
Actually, I think those guys would probably say yes, but whether their governments would let them do it, whether their compatriots would let them do it, because it means, California and China sharing with Somalia and Italy and Scotland. Um, it's a big, big challenge, and we haven't thought about it. And the people who should be thinking about it are economists. There's a very famous AI researcher who wrote the book that everybody reads when they start studying AI, called Stuart Russell. Years ago, he suggested that we should get a whole load of economists and science fiction writers and lock them in a room together and not let them out until they've come up with a solution to that problem. And I think he was absolutely right. That's exactly what we should do.
Yeah, something that kind of popped into my head yesterday. I was thinking about, I think this was in Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. And there was just a tiny section where he was talking about how when we shift towards machines taking over, you just naturally shift towards a tyrannic government as well. Because part of the, I guess, requirements of government is they, if there are elections, say in a democracy, you need to get votes from people because those people are the workforce of the economy, essentially. So you need to get elected by people, and then you need those people to like you so that they continue to work and whatever. And it does feel like, I don't know if this is necessarily connected. Maybe it's just happening at the same time. In Britain, it does feel like we're shifting towards something further away from democracy at the moment. And I sort of worry that as we get further away from people having more input in things, when you don't need people and you just have robots do everything, what happens to government? And it does sort of feel like we're shifting towards, well, digital ID is a big thing talked about in Britain right now. And there's sort of, there's a debate currently going on about whether or not we're going to have, what is it called? The trusted news, I can't remember exactly what it is, trusted news sources, where you get your news from one place. And now there's all this criticism of the BBC and whether or not they're actually biased. And there was the head of the BBC that recently openly said that they were biased in a progressive direction. I think it was to do with trans issues and things like that. It does feel like as we shift away from humanity kind of controlling things, that there is what a lot of people say, there's a smaller and smaller subset of people with power to control things, and then what happens to humans. I don't know if it's talked about enough. I don't think I can make any sense of where humanity is going to go, because yes, you mentioned the economy, but just generally daily life for humanity as well. What do we do? And I think the main argument against UBI, and I certainly see this as rational, is what do we do with ourselves? What is our purpose? And people say, oh, it's sort of like being in retirement. You can be creative and travel and spend more time with family, but it feels like it could go either way. There's people who are retired and have happiness in life and meaning and purpose. And there's also a younger generation of, I think the term is NEEP. I always forget, not in education, employment, or can't remember, training. NEET.
Yep.
Yeah. Not NEEP, NEET.
Neat.
So it feels like there's a younger generation, is it Generation X, that is kind of a bit lost. And I worry if that connects too much with this new age of AI taking over all of our jobs, kids graduating and then immediately not having anything to do with their degree because AI is completely taken over. The famous example I always give is during COVID, Rishi Sunak said, was it Fatima, or I can't remember, the retrain in cyber, if you remember that poster. No. There's a little girl in ballet shoes, and they were trying to get people to stop doing degrees in the arts. And they were saying she should retrain in cyber. And now that's not true because AI's taken away all the cyber jobs. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to humanity. I literally can't make any sense of it because I think it's going to be something entirely different, similar to the revolution in agriculture or the industrial age. As people couldn't have possibly imagined how we live today. But I think it's on an entirely different scale. We don't know what's going to happen. What are we going to do on a day-to-day basis? I guess I'll shift that conversation monologue, I suppose, into transhumanism because that's a thing that's talked about more and more. Sort of feels a bit Black Mirror-y to me. It feels like 10 years ago I watched these. I love the show. It's great, but it's terrifying. It feels like we're actually there now. There's all these meta glasses and things that, potentially, what is it? Neuralink, Elon Musk's Neuralink. Do you see humanity continuing on in any way that's not cyberpunk, robotic? or is that the only possible option that we have?
So you've thrown out a lot of interesting thoughts there, and let's pull on a few of those threads. So let's start with
Mm,
democracy. I think in the UK, democracy is alive and kicking. Uh, there is a grave danger to it because a lot of people have been seduced by populist ideas. Populism
mm,
is something that's misunderstood. A lot of people use it to just mean politics I don't like, but it does have a very specific meaning. It means that somebody comes along who is usually a member of the establishment and says, the establishment has stolen your birthright and I'll give it back to you. So Nigel Farage is a classic populist. He's very much a member of the establishment, a city trader, extremely
mm, mm,
rich, very privileged background. He comes along and says that your golden past has been stolen and I will restore it to you. And it's a lie. The past wasn't golden and he's not going to restore it. He's got no solutions to any real problems at all. And he just wants to make a lot of money and be famous. And if he can become prime minister. And
sure.
if he does become prime minister, I think Britain will then be in grave danger of losing its democracy, as America is now in grave danger of losing its democracy. It's touch and go, really. What will Trump do between now and the end of his term? What will Stephen Miller and JD Vance, who know that they have no political future, they can't replace Trump. They have no charisma, so they can't succeed him. Will they just go quietly, or will they mount some astonishing stunt in order to, end American democracy so they can stay in power? Who knows? It's a very perilous situation. So populism is a big danger, and the reason why populism happens, I believe, is not because of economic difficulties. It's because of change. People feel very uncomfortable about change, and since the 60s, particularly, Western societies have changed a lot. Women didn't used to go out to work. To be blunt, coloured and black people used to get beaten up quite often, and
Mm,
gays kept themselves to themselves. That's all
mm,
changed. Women are now out at work. Um, Racism is unacceptable in most Western countries now, which is a good thing. These are good things. These are good changes. And being gay is very few people now think that's a matter of shame, and neither should they. So these changes, I think, are all good, but they make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and they make people susceptible to the charms of populists like Nigel Farage. Um, so that's all happening at the moment, and it's the wrong time for it to be happening because we've got these other changes that we should be paying attention to. Um, the second thing that you talked about, well, actually, tell you what, I've forgotten the middle thing. So let's go to the transhuman issue.
sure. I
Uh,
think I've
what
forgotten as well.
what is the future of humanity? So transhumanism is the idea that it is okay to change ourselves and to become more than human or beyond human or post-human by altering our physical and mental basic makeup. Some people think, a lot of religious people think, that that is a bad thing to do. It's immoral, and we should just stick with being human as we are. I am a transhumanist. I think it's actually desirable to improve on the human condition. The human body and the human mind are amazing things. They're truly
Mm,
stunning things, incredibly complicated, wonderful. But they are flawed, seriously flawed. We can't seem to live beyond 115 years, and most of us don't get past 90. We can't leap over tall buildings. We can't
mm,
repair ourselves, and if an arm gets lopped off, you can't grow another one. There's loads
mm,
of things we can't do, which would be really handy to be able to do.
mm,
Um, so I think if you can change the nature of ourselves to solve our problems, that's a good thing. Um, so superintelligence, particularly, should be able to do those things for us, and it might do it by uploading us into a computer. We might find that our future is to merge with the superintelligence. Because apart from anything else, humans sitting around watching superintelligence become smarter and smarter and doing all sorts of astonishing things and traveling around the galaxy and so on, we probably get quite jealous and perhaps a bit despairing to realize just how insignificant we've become. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll think it's all okay. But I think it might well be better for us to merge with our creation and become post-human. So I'm very up for that. Now I realize that to a lot of people that sounds horrendous. It sounds like a dystopian science fiction future, Black Mirror is brilliant. I just wish that sometimes they would have a positive story, because all of their stories are about the downside impact of technology, and there are lots. But generally speaking, technology has good upsides. The reason why we all live much, much better lives than cavemen or people in the Middle Ages is because of technology. We live
Mm,
longer, we're healthier, we know much more about how the world works. We know that the universe is 13.7 billion years old. It's astonishing we can
mm,
find things like that out. And it's all because of our application of technology. So I think that generally speaking, the application of technology produces good outcomes. I think an outcome where we become post human, liberate ourselves from the limits of being human, is a good future. I realize that not everybody thinks that. Maybe where we'll end up is a world in which there are some people, you could call them Adamists, who want to remain human. Maybe they
mm,
want to get rid of malaria and Ebola, but otherwise they want to stay human. And they do. And they live on the earth and nobody bothers them. And then there are other people who upload into supercomputers and go whizzing around the galaxy in spaceships and have a lovely time. I don't see
mm.
why those two things aren't possible at the same time. If that happens, I'll be on the spaceship.
I think the question that comes to my mind there is who controls the technology, I
Oh,
suppose.
that
If
was the
we're
other thing you raised. Yeah, let's dig into that.
mm,
Who
yeah,
controls it, and whether we're inevitably going to go to a dictatorship. So
sure.
in a world where a few technology companies are earning all the money, the entire
Mm,
economy has ended up in their hands. It's hard to imagine how the resources then get shared around the world without the intervention of some form of government. Now,
mm,
maybe by the time we get there, we've got superintelligence, and so the AI does it all. And we have no say in the matter because it tells us what it's going to do and we can't
mm,
stop it. Or maybe that happens before we get to superintelligence and it's human governance structures of some sort which do the sharing. And I think that's actually quite likely. Now, that will be some form of government. It might be the current structure of 200 governments, and America says, right, Somalia you get 2%, and Italy you get 5%, or whatever the numbers are.
mm,
Or it might be there's a supranational government and the UN takes over. It's hard to imagine that, but maybe that's what happens. Would that necessarily be an autocracy? Well, as has been often observed, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you'd have an awful lot of power if you were the people who were determining how these resources got shared around the world. So it's a
mm.
grave, grave danger. Um, and that's one of the reasons why we really ought to have a plan for how it all works out. I don't think it's inevitable that we get a dictatorship. And I certainly don't think it's inevitable that we get dystopia. This may sound a bit sort of naively optimistic, but I do think the world today has got a lot of problems, lots and lots of problems. But if you understand what it was like to live in the 17th century or the 18th century, and even more the 12th or 13th century, you would not exchange life today for life then if you were the same level in the society. Um,
Of course.
Generally speaking, technology improves our lives, and I think it's reasonable to believe, reasonable to hope that the next round of technology will also improve our lives. It's not inevitable. We do go backwards. Things go in cycles sometimes, but I think it's entirely possible we'll get an optimistic version of the future.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think what everyone's obviously looking forward to is ASI flying around the galaxy or the universe. But there is just like you can name every technology. The example that comes to mind is refrigerators, how they've now got screens and ads on them now. And the last thing you want as a humanoid robot 2000 years in the future is to wake up and get ads that are in your brain because it's part of whatever company created your body. And you've got everything that's as exciting as Google, for example, right? Google's got all sorts of examples. I think it's called Tech Watch Project. I can't remember the name of the guy who runs it, but it's all about how Google will slightly shift patterns of behavior for elections, and they can sort of like hide or they can suppress or sort of push up certain results on Google to kind of sway people's election behavior. And we've seen that with the Trump elections and Brexit and the
I,
Cambridge Analytica
I
project.
highly
And
doubt that. I mean, if that was true, if Google could do that, I don't think we'd have Trump because I don't think they were pro-Trump in 2016.
I don't remember who did it specifically, but they have shown in different elections, well, Trump was slightly different. Trump wasn't Google. Trump was the Cambridge Analytica project, which was, I can't remember his name, the guy who worked on the whole Brexit project and was kind of the mastermind. There was a documentary about him where Benedict Cumberbatch played him, and
Well, you're
the
thinking
Barnard
of
Castle guy in COVID. I can't remember his name.
Cummings, Dominic
Cummings,
Cummings.
yeah.
I mean, I think on the whole, the impact of Cambridge Analytica has been demonstrated to have been a lot less significant than we thought at the time. I think it's quite likely that Russian money was a lot more significant than we are yet aware of. Uh,
Mm.
the populist story is a grim one, and Brexit was a result of populism. It was a result of lies that were told by Farage and others, and we are all now suffering the disbenefits. Brexit is the gift that keeps taking. What are we down now? 6 or 8% GDP compared to where we would have been. We're a much diminished country because of the lies that populists told, and sadly, a lot of people are still falling for Farage's lies, and he's one of, if not the most popular politician in the country. I'm hoping that the current round of scandals surrounding him will finally make people realize that he's a thoroughly nasty person and a totally corrupt individual, and that will be the end of his career. But who knows? He's a very canny politician.
We could finally have Count Binface in Parliament.
Wouldn't that be
Very
wonderful?
exciting.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Something everybody wants.
Yeah.
To go back a little bit, I guess because what we were slightly talking about was, I guess, like bias. The other argument, or the other side of that argument, could be regulation. This is something I think Sam Altman is starting to talk about a little bit more, that he wants regulation. I don't know if there's any way that we can have it, because you've already touched on it in this conversation. If we've got China and Russia and North Korea, for example, all rushing to, I guess what you see in China every day is they keep stealing the latest models of Claude or whatever Anthropic's got.
Well,
and
they're
their
using
models.
a process called distillation, where they
Right.
they train their models with the existing very powerful frontier models, and they do it in quite surreptitious ways. But then Elon Musk admitted that Grok used distillation as well. I think that the tricks that they do, and actually, the Chinese are not just stealing; they're also innovating and introducing remarkable improvements on their own as well. It is very, very long time ago that they just copy what we do and produce a cheaper version. They're not at the frontier level. The frontier labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, are usually said to be about 6 months ahead of the open source models in China. I think that probably varies a bit, but that's probably the lead time. And all of the labs, including Mistral in France, they're innovating like crazy.
So I guess my question around that was regarding regulation, because it does feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's irresponsible either way, because if you want to get the best, say, most moral super intelligence 10 years in the future, you want to be careful and you want to take careful steps and you want to talk about it with different experts from different fields. But then if you also want to, for example, have America beat China, I know you talk about the fact that Europe isn't really in the game yet. There's a couple of companies, but they're certainly not high up on the list. But if you want to beat another country in this multipolar world, you kind of want to get there as fast as possible, which then kind of eliminates that idea of talking with all the experts and doing it as carefully as possible. Do you have any thoughts on like the best way to go ahead with this, or does it really even matter, because they're just going to push ahead with it anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm torn about this, because if we were a rational species, we would stop, we would pause. And organizations like the Future of Life Institute, which is pioneered by Max Tegmark and Stuart Russell and people like that, they're arguing hard for a moratorium, and they're right. We should pause. We should not continue with the experiment of making ourselves the second smartest species on the planet. It's really not a good idea if you don't know how to make the first smartest species like you. But I don't think we will. However, you can imagine scenarios where we at least delay it. So people in the big AI labs, the frontier labs, are increasingly saying, look, it really is time for society to wake up and think more seriously about this and maybe have a pause. Anthropic put out a paper recently saying we're getting quite close to recursive self-improvement, which means we have lost control of the AI. Not super intelligent yet, but we've lost control of it. We're getting close to that point. and we ought to have a brake pedal, as they said. And it's quite odd, a lot of people despise the people who run these organizations because they think they're just sort of big, fat, greedy capitalists. But actually, they're the only people of any note um, who are calling for caution and occasionally calling for regulation. And so, yeah, in principle, regulation, a pause, good idea. We should do it. And if it could be uh, agreed between America and China, because as you say, the Chinese government is not keen on uncontrolled and uncontrollable mines. So they quite highly regulate their own LLM makers. You could have an agreement. Say if there's a major disaster occurs thanks to an AI agent, and you get a groundswell of demand for a pause, and it happens. America and China agree, and because they make all the LLMs, there are no more developments in LLMs for a while. Like I say, in the long run, I do think that Russia and North Korea and Elon Musk and various other people would carry on. But it would take them a while, and maybe in that time we could figure out how to make them safe. Maybe sentient superintelligence is the answer. So I wouldn't argue against it. I'm just slightly pessimistic about its chances. But generally speaking, should AI be regulated? Is a question people often ask, and the answer is, of course, it should. I mean, it's
Mhm.
really a bit of a daft question because can you imagine any other industry which can cause significant harm to people? The car industry, the finance industry, the medical industry. Can you imagine any of those industries suddenly having all their regulation taken away? It's
Mm.
just mad. And at the
Mm.
moment, the AI industry, apart from in Europe, is pretty much unregulated. But there are regulations in America actually, but they're happening at the state level. The government has no interest in it, and the regulations are different around the world, which is very unhelpful. Um,
Mm.
so yes, it should be regulated.
Mm.
Regulation
Mm.
is always a tricky thing because regulators are always fighting last year's battle. They rarely have the talent that is available to the people they're trying to regulate. So, it often doesn't work as well as you'd like it to, but to not have it at all is really not a good idea.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, people talk about it with. There's the whole Big Pharma Supreme Court case going on right now. Oh, sorry, not Big Pharma. Big Ag. Big Pharma is unregulated when it comes to vaccines, but now they're talking about giving immunity to um, companies that provide fertilizers as well, which is terrible because they've been shown to injure all sorts of people. Pesticides and um, herbicides is the other one, I guess, that have been shown to give people all sorts of cancers, and they're kind of trying to give them immunity. And it's a horrible idea in any sphere. What do you think the thing is that it sounds like generally what you're talking about is education. People need to be more educated, and that this should be. And I've heard, for example, in the next presidential election, that AI is going to be the biggest topic. I think it should. It sounds like you think it should. I don't think people are concerned about the right things. It seems like what people are most concerned about at the moment is water usage and energy usage, but it seems like those problems are being solved quite quickly. And if we're following Moore's law, it seems like, yes, obviously, nuclear power plants for AI data centers is a big problem right now, but in a matter of months or even years, it really won't be a big problem anymore. From what I can see, the water usage isn't even really a problem. There was a Nevada or something where they were talking about brown water coming through their pipes, and from what I can understand, that's not actually anything to do with AI. That's not how data centers use water. They sort of filter it, and from what I can understand, it's actually more to do with construction. And whenever you've got a big construction project, kind of anywhere, it'll rattle the rust out of people's pipes, and then they end up with brown water, and they go, "Oh my God, look at what they're doing to the water," and it's actually got nothing to do with it. So I'm curious, what do you think is the either one, or if there's a few big things that people should be concerned about as AI gets better and better?
I think the number one thing people should do is exactly what you're doing, which is asking questions like this. And
Mm.
what this conversation has shown is this is a ferociously complex subject, but it's
Yeah.
also the most important subject. The
Mm.
arrival of superintelligence is almost certainly going to be the most important event in human history, any time up until now. People often compare it to the Industrial Revolution. It is much, much bigger than that. The Industrial Revolution is probably the biggest thing that's happened to humanity so far. We're not in the fourth Industrial Revolution or any of that nonsense. We're in the beginning of the Information Revolution, and it's going to be much, much bigger than the industrial one. Um,
Mm.
so people need to try and get their heads around it. And the only way to do that is to spend a lot of time reading, watching videos, talking to people, doing what you're doing. So I think what you're doing is absolutely the right thing that everybody should do, because it absolutely should be number one issue in every election.
Mm.
And we can only have species wide an intelligent decision if we've got people understanding it to a reasonable degree. And it's a complex subject. So that's number one thing. With regard to the environmental impacts of data centers, firstly, water, I think, has been a complete red herring. You're quite right. The water uses of data centers is nothing like people have sometimes said it is. I think I read something that the data centers in America, and America's got a lot of data centers, they use a lot less water than golf courses. So it's just really
Right. Right.
not a big issue.
Mm.
Energy is a big issue. It can make energy more expensive for everybody else if they're competing the price up. But as you say, we will build more energy sources. It takes time. So in the short term, while the new energy sources are coming online, it does drive up prices for other people. So energy is an issue, but as you say, it will get resolved. One of the great things that's happening in the world is the way we are moving towards renewable sources. I mean, in a lot of
Mm.
Europe, I spend quite a lot of time in Spain, and Spain generates most of its electricity now from renewable resources, from wind and sun.
Mm.
Just so happens Spain's got a lot of both of those things, and so that's a good thing, and that will accelerate
Yeah.
because the more you build of that sort of installation, the cheaper it gets, and the better we know how to do it, and so it becomes easier and cheaper to do it. So I don't think those things are a long-term problem. But the big thing is we need people to be literate about AI. I'll give you a little idea that somebody told me the other, which I rather like. We all know about IQ, our
Mm.
intelligence level, and we know
Sure.
about EQ, our emotional intelligence level.
Okay.
Somebody
Yeah.
said we now need to think about AQ, which is our ability to tune with AIs. There's a cliche, and it's a cliche because it's true, that an AI won't take your job at the moment, but somebody who works well with AI may take your job. So that person has AQ. So
Mm.
we all want to have AQ for our own career purposes, and
Mm.
also because using large language models in our personal lives is both fun and useful. So we need to do it for our own selfish purposes, but we also need to understand AI so that we can collectively make good decisions about these incredible
Mm.
changes that are coming.
Mm. Yeah, I was in the camp about a year ago of not wanting to use it, not wanting to go near it. You hear about students who are using it to write essays, and there was a thing that was said. Nobody's really saying it anymore. It was a couple of months ago that anyone who used AIs was getting dumber, and then they were like, "Well, what if you use AI in an intelligent way and you're asking it really clever questions and it's giving you breakdowns of information?" And it's like you can't possibly be getting dumber. But I still know a lot of people. I was chatting with my partner about this like maybe 2 weeks ago, and she was saying particularly young liberal people, a lot of people that I know, because I come from sort of the world of art and I'm an actor. She was saying a lot of our friends don't like it and don't want to go near it and really have an aversion to it, which was quite surprising. And then it sort of what I call red card me into seeing it more. And then I sort of realized that there are a lot of people. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are like building their own AI models that they can use kind of offline. But then there's a lot of people who really have an aversion against it, which is quite shocking because I've sort of picked it up quite quickly. I had a friend that I spoke to he's in the top 1% of AI users worldwide, which means he just uses it for everything. And he's of the mindset that the people who don't learn to use it are just simply going to be left behind. And that we should create models for, for example, for pensioners who don't know what they're talking about, create simpler models just so they can begin to understand what is going on, which I think is 100% the case. Yeah, no more questions there. Just another monologue. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a really lovely conversation, and I like the little like bits of knowledge as well. The golf course thing was really interesting. I didn't realize that we don't use nearly as much water for AI data centers as we do for golf
Somebody
courses.
will
That was
come up and
great.
challenge that, but I've read that that's the case.
I'm going to go look it up now. Speak to ChatGPT, which is my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Um, could you please let people know where they can find you and your work and your talks online?
So the best place to go is Conscium, which is www.conscium.com.
Mm.
That's the company that I co-founded. And then my talks are at my own website, which is www.calumchace.com. No punctuation. Calum Chace is spelled oddly, which makes me quite easy to find. One L and two C's in the surname.
Mm. Perfect. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you again for your time. This has been a great chat. It's been really fun. It's kind of flown by.
Very nice to meet you, Tom. Very nice to meet you. And keep asking the questions because you're asking great questions.